Hello, this is our E101 final presentation. So starting off, we need to be in the design cycle. So we had the team contract assignment. Now, during this assignment, we created a timeline for where we thought we'd be every week for our meetings. And although we didn't stick to it very well or strictly, I think it kind of helped us get started early. Now, our next meeting, we had a lot of brainstorming. So we need to think of ideas of a very simple design that perform two functions very well. So you see here, we have a couple different ideas. And we ended up settling on our first one, which was a drink holder, but we were not sold entirely on what functions it would have yet. We just decided on a cup holder. So the original prototype here was Tinkercad, and it's very rudimentary. It doesn't have our two functions, but it helped us get a good idea of what we were doing and what we were looking at, sort of sizes and all those sorts of very basic information. But we really just needed a launching point. And our second prototype, it was more on another idea we were having, where it was like has more of an axis. So it's a little more of a complicated design, but it's still not advanced enough, and it doesn't have our multiple functions yet, but it's really just another advancement on our original idea of a cup holder. So here we had our literature review and research component. So here are a bunch of ideas that we had for Thingiverse, as well as different sources we found online talking about 3D printing and the nature of just how it prints and how these devices work, which I feel like helped us get a better understanding of what technology we were working with. And the Thingiverse things helped us a lot with ideas of how we could make it more advanced or clean up our design, and when we were actually translating it to something that would print as we we're going to be using SolidWorks.
So after looking over many examples resembling our idea, we settled on a design we wanted that took ours a step up. We wanted to make a cup holder that balances itself out. So we went for a gyroscope, and we wanted it to have the ability to clamp onto surfaces. So this was the first SolidWorks design, which got the general shape and size of our solution. It featured a base cup holder that had axles coming out of the side on the top, which attached to an inner ring and an outer handle. When reviewing the functionality of this, the gyroscope mechanic didn't work as we intended because it only rotated on one axis. To fix this, the axles needed to attach from the base to the inner ring, and then another set of axles needed to attach the inner ring to the handle in the other axis. Another problem with this design was that the axles needed to be held in place because they would have just fell out. So we solved this by changing the axles to screws. The screws were screwed in tight for the outer layers, which kept that section fixed in place. Meanwhile, the thinner shaft of the screw wouldn't actually screw into the inner layers, and this allowed the cup holder to rotate on an axle. For the second function of our design, the gyroscopic cup holder needed to be attachable. We found the best solution for this to be a simple clamp. The clamp would attach to the end of the handle, and the screw would be inserted through the hole in the clamp. When attaching a bar, rod, etc., the screw can be screwed in to make sure that everything is tight. And additionally, a removable cap, which is the part on the bottom left, can be attached to the screw to even out the pressure on a flat plane, or removed in case you need that extra space. Luckily, our first prints were successful, and we only had to assemble it to finish as long as there weren't any setbacks in this process.
So the assembly of the parts, as depicted in these pictures here, first of all, when first printing the whole model straight from SolidWorks, it ended up being too big on our printers. So we had to scale it down by around 60%, which you can see on the first picture on the left. And it ended up fitting water bottles and soda cans pretty perfectly. In the second picture, you can see it fully put together. We also had a third ring in there so that it could just as a placeholder until we were able to get the actual third ring. Putting in the screws are interesting, especially the ones connecting the inner ring and the middle ring, just because they had to have some space between them so it could actually rotate properly. But the outside ones we were able to screw in completely. The second parts that we ended up making, you can't see on the outer ring, but the difference between the first one we made and the second one is it is a bit larger, and there's a hole in the middle so that we can put the screws in. The screws were a pretty tough thing to figure out because we didn't put threads in our original 3D print. So we had to find ones with sharper edges so that we could actually screw it into the plastic. So here you can see our second assembly. I actually ended up using our own model to stabilize the third ring so I could get the screws in correctly. And then us not putting threads in the original design actually had some problems with the screw. Some of the plastic started to split open on one of the sides, but luckily it was in solid enough that it wouldn't open up anymore as we moved the project. And then in the last picture, you can see the completed design of the project attached to one of the chairs. We also tested it on plenty of tables and some lawn chairs since those were our intended spot. So some advice and reflection. I wish that I was more careful with the assembly so that we didn't have any kind of splits in the plastic or anything like that.
And I wish we sort of started printing earlier because we banked largely on us finishing with the first design. If we started earlier, we'd have a bit more wiggle room. I feel like we would have been more comfortable.
And I feel that making physical sketches for each part would make sure that the dimensions were correct, they made sense, and that we all knew what it would look like.
Right, and that is the end of our presentation. Thank you so much.